Have you ever completed a mega build in Minecraft but didn't know what to do for the interior? Then today's video is for you because we are going to be covering how to build interiors for mega builds in Minecraft. Let's get started. Welcome back everyone. Today we are starting off in front of my base from Season 12 on the Project Nordinium server. If you've seen the videos where I built it, then you know that the interior of this build is incomplete. So I thought it would be the perfect project to use as an example of what to do when building an interior. I've gone ahead and made a copy of this build in a creative world, which will make working on it a lot easier. Taking a look around this interior, it feels like we have a lot of room to work with, but it can start to fill up fast. Before we start placing a bunch of blocks, there are three concepts that I wanted to cover that you should keep in mind when designing an interior: layout, layers, and lighting. The layout is essentially the floor plan for the build. When designing the exterior of a build, there's a lot of flexibility in how you do it. You can make it as wide or as tall as you want, as long as you keep it below world height limit. But for the interior, you've got to make it work within the limits of your existing build. Could you just start with one room and build each room as a patchwork maze of rooms? Sure, but planning out the layout in advance can make for a more cohesive interior. While you're working on the layout, you'll also want to keep in mind the number of layers that you're going to be using. In other words, how much detail are you going to want to put into the walls and ceilings and floors? Are you going to be going for a lot of depth? Do you want to add a lot of detail, or is it just going to be a simple room? You should plan the layout based on the number of layers you're going to be able to use. Otherwise, you could end up having floors, walls, or ceilings that don't line up correctly. Once you've worked out the layout and layers, the last thing to keep in mind is how you're going to add in lighting. If you're dealing with a large enclosed space, lighting it up can be a challenge. Just having light on the floor or ceiling may not be enough, depending on the mood that you want to set for your build. If you want something that is dark and spooky, then you don't need to worry as much about lighting. But if you want it to be bright and cheerful, you're going to need to get creative. So as you're getting started planning out your interior, remember the 3 L's: layout, layers, and lighting. But now that we've got that covered, I think we should see how it works in practice, which we're going to do by creating the layout of the floors and rooms for one of the sides of this building. And then we're going to go in and actually work on one of the rooms to be able to see how layers and lighting can come together to create a finished design. To figure out the layout for this area, I think what we are going to have to do is first figure out the different floors that we're going to be putting in. Now, there is a natural separation here to have floor 1, floor 2, and floor 3, but that doesn't carry over into this area where it's just floor 1 and floor 2, or this area, which is floor 1 or floor 2. We've also got to figure out where we're going to be dividing up the rooms, because we could have a wall going across here to make this all one big room. We could have a wall going across here to make that a room. We could then have walls coming down here, but then we've just got a really long, narrow room, and what would we even use that room for? So there are quite a few different ways that we could go with this. Let's start figuring this out. As I was going through creating the layout, there were 2 things I was trying to accomplish. The first was to make sure that the rooms lined up with the windows that were created when I did the exterior. And the second was to make sure that you could access the rooms in a logical way. Once you finish working out the layout, the next thing to do is walk through the rooms that have been created to see how they flow together. And what you're checking for here is basically, where are doors placed and how easy is it to get from point A to point B? This is also a good time to start figuring out what are going to be the different functions for the rooms that you've created. So one thing that I've noticed just in walking around these rooms is that we've got this strange little setup right here where we've got a little door that leads around a corner. And what this would lead to is this long hallway that would take you over to this side of the build. And I think that's just a little bit awkward. So if I was planning this out again, or when I go to start decorating this area, this is probably something that I might spend a little bit more time on trying to restructure to see if I could have it flow better. And that's why it's helpful to plan these things out in advance, because then you could spot these issues before you've gone too far in getting everything built. So once you've gone through the layout that you've created and you're happy with how everything flows together, it's time to start adding in the details. Before we can start adding in the details though, we do need to cover a few basics. Starting with color. Are you trying to create a room that's nice and cozy, or do you want a room that feels grand and imposing? This is all going to be influenced by the colors that you pick out. In front of me, we've got two different examples that we're going to be using as we talk about colors. Each example uses the same types of details, but for very different effects. Compare how the red room feels with how the blue room feels. Ignoring the fact that I sort of blend into the background on this one. Can you see how the reds, browns, and yellows all work together to create a room that feels a little bit more warm and cozy? While the blues, grays, and blacks all work together to create a room that's a little bit more cold and distant. The blocks used and the details added in are all the same, but by changing up the colors, we can have completely different effects. The second basic principle that we need to cover is the use of contrast. And we can do that by comparing how this wall looks with this one. Adding in some contrast makes for a more dynamic look. When there's too much of one color, it can make things feel a little bit flat, which isn't a bad thing if that's what you're going for. But if you're trying to create something dramatic, contrast can be a useful tool. The third basic principle that we're going to be covering is designing an interior that matches the exterior. The build that we're working on today is inspired by Gothic architecture, which means that our interior should probably match that type of design, which means that we should have an interior that's going to have things like pillars and arches instead of the clean, simple lines of a more modern style. So now that we've covered the basics, let's put that to use and start designing this room. Let's start by getting our blocks picked out. So we're going to start with the blocks that we've used in other parts of this build, which is the smooth quartz blocks, the stripped pale oak wood, and the pale oak planks. We are also going to be using some dark oak logs and dark oak planks, and we're going to add in some accents using tough blocks and cut copper blocks. Now I think we're ready to get started with designing this room. But before we can start designing it, we need to decide what this room is going to be. There are a couple of different directions that we could go with this room, and in keeping with the type of build that this is, which is a Gothic mansion, we could turn this room into a giant dining hall, a ballroom, or a library. And I really like the idea of turning this into a library, so that's what we are going to do. So let's start mocking out some areas with the types of things that we want to add in. The first thing that I've done is move the door from being in the center of this wall over to the side. And the reason I did that is because I think it would be good to have a giant fireplace in the middle of this wall as a nice feature for this room. The other thing that I'm thinking that we could do is have the bookshelves run in between where these windows are. So we're going to have some walls right here and maybe a center point. No, there's not going to be a good center point because that'd be two. So let's just leave that as an open spot there. We'll put some walls there and there, and maybe there. And then what we would have would be the bookshelves running in this spot right behind where these walls are. And that would allow us to cover up the exterior wall, which is not looking very good on this side. I've added in these marks on the floor, which I think we're going to turn into pillars, which will go up to the ceiling. We've got the walls laid out, and we've got our fireplace marked too. Let's get to work crafting up this room. When I'm starting out on any project, what I like to do is take it in chunks. So in this example, I started by working out the design that I was going to use for the bookshelves, and then once I had that figured out, I could replicate it in the other parts of the room. And as you can see throughout this time lapse, that's what I did for all of the different parts. So while I was creating the different pillars, I first worked out that design with the first pillar and then replicated it across. And when I was working on the ceiling, I did the same thing. So I worked out the details in one spot, and then I replicated those details across the entire ceiling. And I think that's an effective way to design when you're working with a large space, because if you try to do it all at once, it can be intimidating. But if you break it down into smaller chunks, it can be a lot more manageable. We've now got a completed library, and now that it's finished, we can start taking a look at different ways in which we've incorporated lighting into this room to make sure that it doesn't look all dark. So let's start with the obvious examples of lighting. Over on this side, we've got the fireplace, and the fire right here is obviously creating a lot of light. And then we have the end rods, which are used to create these lamps, lighting up the area around the chairs and making sure the center of the room is lit up. Now, for some of the less obvious examples of lighting, you've probably spotted the ones that are in the pillars where we've got these frog lights here, as well as the frog lights over here. And these lights are important for keeping the walls lit up, because if we took them out, just look at how dark this pillar turns out to be, and that's not the feeling that I wanted to go for in this room. This is a library. You're going to be reading in here. You're going to want to have light to be able to read in here. So I wanted to be sure that this room was bright and well lit. Some other examples of less obvious lighting would be these copper grates with the lights underneath, and that's a good way to light up the floor. And then you may also be able to spot some lights here behind these trapdoors, which are going up this wall. But in addition to those, I've also got some completely hidden lights, and those are underneath these carpets here. So you can see I've got one right there, I've got one right there. There's probably one underneath here, and I think not that one. There we go. So there's that. So I've used some carpets to hide the lights, and then also over in this wall, you're not able to see it, but with all of these trapdoors, I've also put in some lights, and we can actually see them if we go around on this side the easiest. You can just see how much we've put into the wall that's hidden by the trapdoors that we've got on this side. When it comes to lighting up an interior space in Minecraft, you got to get a little bit creative. And these are just a couple of examples of how you can go about doing that. So you now have the basics for how to create an interior in a mega build. When doing so, you want to remember the 3 L's: layout, layers, and lighting. As you go through adding in the details, remember to pick colors that match the mood you want to create, and you want to make sure to keep your interior design consistent with your exterior design. And the last thing that you're going to need to do is practice, 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 because the best way to learn how to do any type of building in Minecraft is to actually start placing blocks to see how they work together and what you can create by doing it. But I think that's going to do it for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And until next time, see you later.